Hey, everybody. Welcome to Read and Reaction for the post game Sunday article. This one isn't quite as happy as I'd like it to be because the title is Vanderbilt Shocks Florida. Is this the beginning or the beginning of the end for Billy Napier? Which is, I think, the question that a lot of people are asking. Tried to dive into that at least a little bit in this one, but really try to explain what happened in Florida's loss to Vanderbilt. If you like our stuff, obviously you can go over to readandreaction.com, check out the articles over there. There are some videos that are embedded in this article that you can get over there. If you could do it for us, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you could like and subscribe, subscribing to the channel, obviously with more subscribers, you'll get notified when the videos come out. But also that helps us. If you like it, hit that bell. That also helps us as well, especially with the algorithm. And finally, if you want to get more from us, if you want to get more content, we do a Wednesday article that's only exclusively on our Patreon channel, as well as a video post game after the game. So we'll be doing that again one more time for Florida State and then for the bowl game later on in the year. We're going to be doing some neat stuff, hopefully during the off season. That'll be a little bit more interactive over there at Patreon. We've also got a feature if you sign up for $10 a month that you can get a call with me and Nick Knudsen and talk to us right before usually one of the stand up and holler episodes. So anyway, if you want to hang over there or head over there and support us, we would very much appreciate it. But with that, I'll get to the article. Vanderbilt shocks Florida. To say that it was shocking to see Florida lose to Vanderbilt is an understatement. By every available statistic, Vanderbilt has been an inferior team this season. But when you just hand points over to the opposition in the SEC, you can lose to anyone, even Vandy. But that's a problem for Billy Napier because Florida doesn't lose to Vanderbilt. The last time it happened in 2013, Florida quarterback Tyler Murphy threw the ball 46 times. Perhaps then it shouldn't be a surprise that in Vandy's next win in the series, Anthony Richardson would throw the ball 43 times. All of which brings things back to Napier. As a first year head coach, he needs to get some grace as the program goes through growing pains. But all of the goodwill built over the past 2 weeks with wins over Texas A&M and South Carolina is gone. You can say a lot of things about this game, but the one that sticks with me is this. When you look at the schedule during the preseason, fans and analysts put the Vanderbilt game in the win category. That's understandable given the history and given the stats thus far. But what it looked like on Saturday was that the Florida staff put this one in the win category too. So you can blame the players for a lot of mistakes, and we'll get to that. But this one falls on Napier because Florida shouldn't lose to Vanderbilt. Mistakes, mistakes, and more mistakes. There were a ton of mistakes that Florida made on Saturday, but there are three in particular that I want to highlight given the way the game turned out. The first play is the Gators' defense. The offense had just come out and driven down the field to start the second half, drawing the score to 14-12. Florida forced a 3rd and 14 and had the opportunity to get the ball back to its offense. Instead, this happened. Florida defensive coordinator Patrick Toney decided to bring pressure, rushing 6 defenders. It worked perfectly as both Princely Human number 33, and Antoine Powell Ryland, number 52, win their one-on-one battles and force Vandy quarterback Mike Wright to throw the ball away. The blitz left Florida linebacker Amari Burney, number 2, in one-on-one coverage against the Vanderbilt tight end. Burney immediately ties him up as he goes out and then doesn't let go. You can see when Wright throws the ball away, Burney and the tight end are only 2 to 3 yards past the line of scrimmage. Even if Burney had been beat, it wouldn't have been a first down. This is just focus. The whole point of bringing 6 rushers is to make the quarterback get rid of the ball quickly. You don't care if he makes the completion. You just care that the play stays in front of you. Had Burney pulled down a receiver going deep, that's one thing. But to hold a tight end on a 3rd and 14 when you know the quarterback is going to get heat is just bad. The second play I'll highlight so far as mistakes is on the offensive side of the ball. Florida was behind 7-3 and was starting to get a little bit of a push up front. It was time to announce that they were going to push Vanderbilt around. That happened on this next play, except that the Gators didn't line up properly. Based on the formation, I suspect Ty Chickacao Bowman is supposed to be up on the line of scrimmage. I realize he hasn't gotten a lot of snaps this season, but this is first day install type stuff. You have to have 7 guys on the line, and he isn't even close. This 27-yard run from Montrell Johnson took the ball to the 4-yard line. The illegal formation penalty had nothing to do with why the play was successful. Most likely, Florida would have converted this into a touchdown. Instead, they settled for a field goal. The third play I'll highlight has to do with special teams. I know you think I'm going to show the muffed punt, but that actually isn't the one I'd point to in terms of preparation. Point after attempts are the easiest points in football. Everything was perfect here for Adam Mahalik. The snap was perfect, and the hold was perfect too. He just yanked it way left. He's now 12 of 18 on field goals, which isn't really that good. And Billy Napier needs to be able to trust his kicker to make sound decisions. And right now, I can't say that he should have much faith in Mihalik. These are just the three that I picked from. The list of mistakes is really long and pretty sickening. A poor snap on the opening drive for a loss of 18. Montrell Johnson drops an easy touchdown catch on 3rd and 8, minus 4 points. Human Milan, unnecessary roughness penalty after a stop on 3rd and 8, minus 7 points. Face mask on Powell Ryland after a sack on 3rd and 12. That's the same drive as the unnecessary roughness penalty. 27-yard run for Johnson, called back on an illegal formation, minus 4 points. Dropped pick 6 by Kamari Wilson, minus 7 points. Muffed punt, recovered for touchdown, minus 7 points. 15-yard run for Johnson with 3:22 left. 15-yard unnecessary roughness on Agukan. Holding on Bernie on 3rd and 14 stop, minus 7 points. Richardson interception, followed by awful tackling on the touchdown to Bresnahan, minus 4 points. Targeting on Ventrell Miller. Reynolds dropped perfect touchdown pass with 3:22 left, catches another 9 seconds later. Missed PAT, minus 1 point. Shorter catches the ball short of the first down. The clock should have run out. Richardson throws a Hail Mary out of the end zone, doesn't give his receivers a chance. Certainly, Vanderbilt caused some of these, but a lot of them are self-inflicted wounds. That's particularly true of the illegal formation and the 2 unnecessary roughness penalties. The potential Wilson pick 6 is a tough play, but it's one that could have been made and turned the tide. All told, Florida had an opportunity to flip the ledger by 41 points in a 7-point loss. Had they made just a few of those plays, they would have escaped Nashville with a win. Instead, it's going to be a long plane ride home. Anthony Richardson. If you'd gone on Twitter after the game, you would have thought that Anthony Richardson cost Florida this game. I'm completely floored at that reaction. Richardson made mistakes in this game just like everyone else. His interception should have never been thrown. He should probably see Chickacao Bowman off the line of scrimmage and get him aligned. But he's also the only reason Florida was anywhere close in this game. The man threw for 400 yards with a 9.5 yards per throw average. He averaged 6.3 yards per rush. His QB rating of 158.3 is his highest against anyone save Eastern Washington all year. His yards above replacement, or YAR, my proprietary quarterback stat that takes running and throwing into account, has him at 1.75 for the game, or good but not quite elite. Was he feast or famine? Absolutely. But he's been that way all year long. Had he played this way and had the running game been even average, Florida scored 40 points easily. But he got zero help from the running game, and Florida had to rely on his arm. For the game, Florida's offense averaged 7.0 yards per play. It's a little bit misleading because they had 6 explosive plays. And if you subtract those from the ledger, the Gators only averaged 3.9 yards per play. But that has been a consistent theme of this Florida offense all season. Explosive, but inconsistent otherwise. You can certainly put some of that on Richardson, but very few of those mistakes I listed above are on him. He played well against the Commodores. You can't say that about many of his teammates. Billy Napier. If you're going to criticize Napier for something in this game, I think it's this. After Human Milan got an unnecessary roughness penalty for retaliating against a Vanderbilt offensive lineman on a 3rd down stop, he remained in the game for the next play. After Chickacao Bowman was lined up improperly on the Montrell Johnson run, he remained in the game for the next play. And after Kingsley Eguakin got a personal foul for a completely unnecessary hit after a 15-yard run by Johnson, Eguakin remained in the game for the next play. None of those errors rises to the level of a shoe throw. But if you're not going to hold your guys accountable for dumb mistakes, those dumb mistakes are going to continue to happen. I hear a lot of noise about Napier's play calling. Specifically, the criticism seems to be that he isn't being aggressive enough. I don't think that's the case. Last week against South Carolina, Richardson had a 56% usage rate. Montrell Johnson plus Trevor Etienne were at 40%. Against Texas A&M, that number was 46%. Johnson plus Etienne were 52%. But against Vanderbilt, Richardson had a 71% usage rate compared to 30% for Johnson and Etienne. Florida and Napier forgot who they are. A prime example of that was after Vanderbilt scored to extend its lead to 21-12. On the first play of the drive, Florida took a deep shot and nearly hit. This was almost a huge play for Florida. The ball hit shorter in the hands, but the defender was able to swipe it away. But look at Vanderbilt's pre-snap alignment. They have 6 defenders in the box to Florida's 6 blockers. It has 2 safeties parallel to each other 11 yards deep, screaming zone coverage. This is the kind of look you want to run against. Instead, Florida doesn't even fake the run. This was a pass from the start, and Richardson is one of a few players with the arm to make this throw. It could have been a big play, but it isn't the way Florida has moved the ball all season long. This is a team that has run the ball on 3rd and long multiple times all season. but somehow ended up with a 2-to-1 ratio of passes to runs. Still, I have a hard time blaming Napier for all of this. I mean, what are you supposed to do about this? Florida caught Vanderbilt in the blitz. Richardson delivered the ball perfectly. Vanderbilt is a man-to-man, which means nobody picks up Montrell Johnson, and he has an open run for a touchdown and at minimum a first down. Instead, he drops it, and the Gators settle for a field goal. Takeaway. I get that fans want to blame someone for a loss to Vanderbilt. Certainly, Napier gets a lot of the blame here because this is his team and his program now. And hearing Dan Mullen snicker about the Gators losing to Vanderbilt on the SEC network in the evening definitely rubbed salt in the wounds. But seeing the grin on Mullen's face was a bit much for me. He's the real reason that Florida is in this state. Napier may have screwed up some things in this game, but the bulk of the problems occurring on the field are because of the players that Mullen brought in. Should Napier have had his team better prepared? Absolutely. Should he have stuck with the run early instead of abandoning it for the pass? Yeah. Should he have yanked his guys off the field after stupid penalties? I think the answer there is yes as well. You can't lose to Vanderbilt and escape culpability. There's no doubt that it's an embarrassing loss, but in the grand scheme of things, this loss isn't going to make or break the Napier era. After a loss like this, I'm sure you'll hear about the loss that Nick Saban had to Louisiana Monroe or the loss Kirby Smart had to Vanderbilt in their first years. It is absolutely true that elite coaches struggle in their first year. But if you're going to cite those examples, then you also need to talk about Mullen's embarrassing loss to Missouri in 2018, or Tennessee's Butch Jones losing to Vanderbilt in 2013, or Nebraska's Scott Frost losing to Troy in 2018. The point is twofold. First, you can't just look at poor results in year one and excuse them because someone elite had poor results It has to be part of building something bigger. Both Saban and Smart brought in the third best recruiting class nationally right after their first season. But perhaps more importantly, they were ranked second in the SEC. Mullen brought in the ninth ranked class, fifth in the SEC. Jones brought in the seventh ranked class, fourth in the SEC. And Frost brought in the 17th ranked class, fourth in the Big Ten. Right now, Billy Napier has the eighth ranked recruiting class nationally. That puts him at fourth in the SEC. He's not going to catch Alabama or Georgia, but a big close will put him on par with LSU. That is way more important to the health of the program than this loss. But won't a loss like this impact recruiting in a negative way? Well, luckily, I've looked at how on-field performance correlates with recruiting in the past, and it doesn't look like it does all that much. The story seems to be that whatever level a coach is recruiting at in August is going to carry through to signing day regardless of performance. Of course, none of that makes us any better. Florida didn't lose this game because it has less talented players. They came in with a substandard game plan, substandard execution, and substandard effort. With just an average performance against Vanderbilt, Florida will be preparing to try to go 8-4 against a huge rival with fans feeling like the program is about to turn the corner. Instead, we're left getting trolled by Florida State for the next week without any real response. The narrative of the program has completely flipped with this one loss. Boosters are upset, fans are apoplectic, and confidence in Napier is at an all-time low. I have people asking whether this is just the low point of the rebuild or if it's the beginning of the end for Napier. The short answer is that winning cures all ills. Win against the Noles, and confidence in the coach and direction of the program will return. But in reality, the result of next week's game will have very little bearing on the direction of the program, just as this loss to Vanderbilt has very little bearing as well. There's only one real way to make sure the ship is pointed in the right direction long term: recruit. So that's my take on Florida's loss to Vanderbilt. Obviously, a tough one for the Gators. Certainly not what any of us wanted, not what any of us expected. Anybody who told you that they expected Vanderbilt to come out and win this one, I think they were lying to you. I know I saw ESPN earlier in the week had it something like 87-13 in terms of percentage favored to Florida. Obviously, you go on the road. It's an 11 a.m. start. Everything was really sluggish early on, but it never stopped being sluggish. Florida has been inconsistent in spurts all season long. They were inconsistent throughout the entire game against Vanderbilt. And the reality is you can't be that over and over and over again and expect to win in the SEC. And look, I think this is an opportunity for Napier to teach his guys. I think everybody in that locker room who cares and is bought in to Florida and building Florida is going to remember the feeling that they have losing to Vanderbilt. They're going to remember the feeling of knowing that they didn't really take Vanderbilt seriously. And that's one of the things I think you probably can put on Napier. Based on the way the game plan looked, not having Richardson run early, not having him have a rush at least until the opening play of the second half as a designed run for him, it does look like the staff thought that they were going to be able to get past this game without having to put Richardson at risk. And that was a mistake. And they came out in the second half and tried to rectify that, but by then it was too late. And by then they were already shooting themselves in the foot. And this team needs a cushion because they're going to make mistakes and they're going to do things that that cause problems. And they just did a whole host of them all at the exact same time. It was funny. I was at a basketball practice for my kid, and so I didn't see the second half, and I knew what happened because I knew the score, but I came back and rewatched the second or watched the second half for the first time. And when I did, I looked at it, I was like, how in the world is Florida behind? Like you looked at it and you're like, they're dominating. The yardage is not even close. Yards per play, not even close. The turnovers were tied 2-2. But Vandy turned the two turnovers into touchdowns, and Florida turned the two turnovers into nothing. And so really it was 2-0 in terms of turnovers. Florida also had, turned it over on downs at their own 12-yard line, which is essentially another turnover. You know, Anthony Richardson did miss a couple of deep throws. He missed some throws where he had guys across the middle who were open for first downs when he decided to take deep shots. He's not a perfect quarterback, and I'm not saying that. But anybody blaming him for this loss, I think, is a little bit misguided. But anyway, this is a rough one, and um, hopefully this puts it in perspective a little bit. This game is not going to define Billy Napier's era. The game against Kentucky won't define Billy Napier's era, just like the games against South Carolina and Texas A&M last week won't define the Napier era. The good news is he's at 6 wins. We're in the bowl. We're in a bowl, so we're going to get all the practices that come with it. There's a whole new recruiting class coming in. Hopefully that's going to be a top 5 recruiting class. Hopefully he's able to get up there, get some 5-star guys. We've heard Okunlola was on campus. Certainly we could use him. Could use some more skilled players on the outside, and could use all those defensive players that they signed there who are in the top 100, top 150. So, look, I think the future is brighter under Napier than it was under Mullen. The question is it going to be bright like Kirby Smart going 8-0 for the second straight year in the SEC? Or is it going to be bright like LSU, where they're able to sort of pop up every once in a while? Or is it going to be bright like Auburn, or maybe not so bright like Auburn, where they pop up every once in a while, but then have some really lean years? And, only time's going to tell, but the place to look at that is not going to be whether Napier out schemes people on Saturdays. We had a guy who could out scheme people on Saturdays last year, and he did it in 2018, and he did it in 2019, and he almost did it against Alabama in 2020 in that SEC championship game. And then everything fell apart in 2021 because he just didn't have the horses to keep up. And that's the reality, is that you need those elite players to allow yourself to get through a game like this. And, as I was writing this, Tennessee was losing to South Carolina, and Spencer Rattler came out and looked like a completely different quarterback this week. And that happens in college football. But what it really points out to me is in Georgia's game against Kentucky, they had such a strong defense that Stetson Bennett could have a complete just dud of a game, and Georgia still came away with the win. And in Alabama's losses this year, Bryce Young has not been fantastic, and they've lost those games. And in at least fantastic in all of them. He was good in the Tennessee game, but it was spurty. It was inconsistent. And then certainly that Texas game, they just got lucky to pull that one out. Young played well in the fourth quarter, but other than that, he was terrible. You look at the Tennessee game, their defense was absolutely awful today. It was bad against Georgia as well. And so, the reality is those teams that recruit at that level are going to struggle at some point along the way. Now, Alabama obviously has recruited a much higher level, but even the Tide, right? Because they're not an elite team right now that can just make up for one side versus the other, they're going to have a couple of those hiccups. And Florida just ran into one of those hiccups today, and Florida's not a good enough team to be able to overcome anybody when they have a hiccup, whereas a team like Georgia could have a hiccup like this against Vanderbilt and would be fine because somebody else would pick up the slack, and because there'd be people to put in when they struggle. So anyway, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for reading. Thanks for listening. And like I said, if you want to check out the article, you can over at readandreaction.com. You can support us over at patreon.com/readandreaction. Get some extras over there. Or if you're watching on YouTube here, just like and subscribe. Help us out with the algorithm. We'd appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Go Gators.